power on.
Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo! Coming to you from the BDSM Studios 3. Yeah, that's right. You heard the number 3. Man, it is always so exciting to have a studio. Let me tell you, there's something to be said. And in fact, well, I said I wouldn't talk about this sort of thing on Sovryn Tech too much anymore, but we're going to get into it a little bit throughout this episode. I mean, there's some things that you cannot avoid the effects of the multiple forces taking advantage of COVID-19. It's nay impossible to avoid the effects. And so a lot of people, so we're going to talk a little bit about it. It's going to show up in our stories. We can't help it, even though our lead story has absolutely nothing to do with it. So, which I couldn't be happier about. Okay. Because this podcast is not going to take advantage of the situation, unlike every fucking other news outlet, every other podcast, or just fuck them all. But right now, certainly a lot of people are getting used to, what is it like to work from home? Now, the man of tomorrow, of course, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, here for you, baby, for another episode of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Episode 368. Wait until you get to 370, and oh, do I mean it. Regardless, I've been working from home for years, very, very long time. So it's not like my life has not exactly dramatically changed because of this. Now, I mean, but there are a couple things that have changed. But the reason I'm bringing this up is the concept of comfort. Okay. And, we could do a whole episode about this conversation of, working from home, what's that like, etc. And I've brought it up many times that it's actually the funny thing is that when you work from home, okay. And again, I've been doing this for, almost a decade now that I've been essentially working from home. I mean, sometimes I have to go, I have to travel or be on location for a bit and on site, but in general, 90% of the time I work from home. The interesting thing is that when you do work from home, a lot of people, here's, any, what's the word I'm looking for? Not any power, any permission granted to a person, whatever that looks like. And permission can be a very abstract thing, as in you have permission to work from home now, or you have, you make more money now. Like even that's kind of a permission, right? That comes from your, from the white collars, whatever. Okay. these things, like when somebody starts making more money or suddenly has a lot more money, I've brought this up a lot of times. It's not that money changes the person. It's that the real person finally comes out, right? Because the more permission they get, the more freedom they think they have to be who they actually are. And when a lot of people, when they work from home, okay, they want to be, maybe because this is the fear everybody has. Oh, if I had to work from home all the time, I mean, this is something I've heard literally for about a decade, like I said. If I had to work from home all the time, I don't think I'd ever get any work done. Well, what does that say? Is the problem home or is the problem the person? I mean, you could say it's a little bit of both, but I mean, I think in large part there's a problem, with, with the person. Okay. I memean, actually the problem is with the job. You don't love what you're doing, right? Even though there's an issue with that concept of, oh, do what you love. Well, that runs into problems, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But one of the ways to mitigate, and even if you are a real, type A go-getter kind of person, you can absolutely work from home and get the shit done, right? One of the things that can still help you, and if you're not a go-getter, one of the things that can definitely help you is to have a space, have a set space. Okay, now this is not something that I've read in some horseshit news outlet lately, even though I'm sure plenty of them are talking about it. This is stuff I've talked about for years already. And that frankly, I already, have well know and have known. So you have a set space, right? And like a studio to do a podcast is absolutely a set space. Like Sovryn Tech went from, if we're going to give it numerical, went from, 5, I say, to like 12. As soon as like I had more of a set studio, right? Where I could just sit down, all the equipment's already ready. The mic's, all I got to do is press a button and the mic is instantly hot. There's, no need to share it with anyone, right? You instantly go. And, that was the original BDSM studio that I had, definitely allowed for that. And I mean, it got to the point where I was at the time where I was almost literally putting out a podcast every single day. Because when you have that set space that is purpose-built and designed, right? It's so easy to just sit down or stand up if you're into that and just make it happen and make it hot. Another thing, I mean, not just that, but even like having that separate computer, we live in an age where computing devices, I mean, I have an old saying that there's no such thing as a $200 computer, there's only a $600 computer. There's no such thing as a $200 computer. There's simply a $600 computer with $400 worth of adware on it, right? But bottom line being, you can get really inexpensive computers for under $200, okay, and have them set up like as a studio machine. I mean, sure, it might be some shitty little laptop, but if you're just using it to, say, record podcasts, or you have very specific work that you do that doesn't require Adobe or anything that intensive, I mean, it's a great thing. Set up a monitor and have a desktop. And this is something I've brought up a lot of times too, is that when you have a desktop setup, okay, not a laptop where you can just lounge and do it. Because when you lounge, when you get yes, you want to be comfortable by having that set space. But when you're kind of lounging more and everything, I mean, it just doesn't, you don't have the gusto, in fact, in podcasting, I've done whole podcasting courses, for varying, companies and people. And, I've been on site doing sessions and everything. And the most important thing that I tell them is posture. Posture is the number one thing. You've got to have great posture. Because I actually, I've edited and actually still do some. I edit other people's podcasts, right, as part of my work. And I can tell when the host is laying down or when they are sitting wrong. I can hear their posture. That's how much posture fucking matters. So now there's a weird thing. I mean, even though computers have not been shall we say, a pervasive part of our lives, the everyday person's life. I mean, it's only been 30 years? The 80s, maybe. when it didn't get really pervasive, like when everybody suddenly had a computer, I would say that was around the year, 99, 2000, something like that. 2003 is when I always say the internet really took off. That's when suddenly everybody was on the internet, even though the internet existed at the consumer level for 10 years, even before then. But that's when it really kicked off. Anyway, even though computers are, interestingly enough, and it's funny to think about that, right? Because you go from suddenly, everybody has a computer, and then in less than 10 years or so, then everybody has a smartphone, right? Once the iPhone kicks off. These devices haven't been with us haven't been a part of everyday life. And for everyone, or more or less everyone, it really hasn't been that long of a time. Okay. But we are used to, whether it's the computer or otherwise, we are used to, we sit down at a desk, and of course the desk in the abstract has been around for centuries, right? But when you sit down at a desk, and with computers, I don't know if it's because of how generally, because again, understand, a lot of people, even in the 90s, didn't have computers at home, right? They had them, they used them at school, usually, like in high school, or maybe used an Apple IIe in elementary school or something. That's what I did, played Oregon Trail or Snakes or whatever. Okay. I've had a computer my whole life. Like I was, in one of those, I guess you could call it fortunate families. I would say, okay, this is becoming a much bigger subject than I expected, but whatever, we're going to run with it. I have issues, and we've talked about these. Actually, we talked about these. This isn't anything new. I know for a lot of people it's new. I talked about this. I can actually remember it might have been the 8th or 9th episode of Sovryn Tech. We are talking years and years ago. Again, we are on episode 368 right now. So episode 8, that long ago. It was somewhere around there. Maybe it was in the teens, but one of the very early episodes where I talked about, what I think is the healthy way for children to encounter computing devices, be that smartphone, desktop, laptop, whatever. Okay. I think having a computer from a very young age, and I mean from I remember rocking my Commodore 64, okay, at like the age of, or even my Atari computers at the age of 4, okay, and onward. We just always had computers, my dad was that kind of guy. And, then I think it was fine for kids because it was such a nascent thing at the time that, I've said this a lot. So I do have a lot of, or not a lot, but I have, compared to some people, I do have a fair amount of formal education in computer science and the computer industry overall. Okay. And in tech overall. But most, and I've said this a lot, most of my knowledge about computers comes from the fact that I was growing up. I was born in 1981, for perspective, that I grew up as all of these technologies were basically getting figured out by the industry itself. So I had to do everything since I was 4. I had to do everything the hard way, right? I had to use DOS. Had to use text commands, used computers before mice were a thing. All this different shit, and that's a great way. And that's actually what I recommended in that early episode of Sovryn Tech, is that teach kids to use the command line first, for fuck's sake. Let them see a computer without a graphic, without a GUI, without a graphical user interface, and let them learn it from the ground up. That way because to understand a thing is to be able to control a thing. And when you control a thing, it doesn't control you. So teaching your kids how to control these devices while they still can is a great and wonderful thing. Regardless, okay? My point in bringing all of this up, well, let me finish off that thought. It's one thing to have kids grow up using, I don't know, maybe learning FreeDOS or FreeBSD or something, and how to install that and how to, do things magically with, with the command line. That's great. Just handing a kid a fucking tablet that, requires almost no thought whatsoever. In fact, they really don't want you thinking when you use them, requires no thought to interact with. No. And all the flash, all the flashiness, no, I don't think that's my opinion. I don't think that's a good idea. And as we've brought up many times over the years on this show, we know that the tech execs in Silicon Valley and around the world, they don't even let their kids use smartphones or tablets until they're well into their teens. They have them go to schools where those aren't a part of the curriculum. But then what do those same exact fucking companies do? They push and sell all these devices to the K through 12 educational market, and of course college and university as well, but certainly in the K through 12 demographic. If pull back the curtain, folks, take a look. If you don't see the contradiction, it's absolute do as I say, not as I do. But whatever. Anyway, when we sit down at a desk to engage a computer, we take things, this is the whole point of this conversation. When we sit down at a desk, we have the big monitor in front of us. In fact, right now I'm honored years ago, a Sovereign Tech listener got me this gorgeous 21:9 monitor. In fact, you can go to, what's the site? Anyway, wishlist.sovereigntech.com. I forgot it. Wishlist.sovereigntech.com. Now that'll take you to Amazon. Don't go there today, and I'll explain why I don't go there today. But if you want to help out with the show, of course, there's always plenty of new equipment that I am outfitting the new BDSM studios with, BDSM Studio 3 again. So my point is that when you sit down, okay, and and you're in front of the computer desktop, you got a real keyboard in front of you, a hardcore mouse, the whole thing, you are taking whatever you're doing far more seriously. In fact, I'll admit, I love the way my man Rob, my co-host for TIE Fighter Renegades and Brother in Life, I love, he called it, I know he's not the only one to call it this, but he calls it his battle station, right? and in the Telegram group, he even says like, hey, everybody want to show off their, their battle station. In fact, it gave me a great opportunity to show off at the time, and I'm still working on the studio. But I built everything in here myself, like all the desk and everything, and made it so that we can have, guests on and everything. And it's really cool, camera angles, and there's still more to do. Not that I ever like to do too much video, but sometimes it calls for it. But I love how he calls it, your battle station, right? And that is, for what it is, that's a fine mindset to have. It's a place where you sit down and you are in action. Okay, now that's something that can help if you're working from home. Create that space where this is where that gets done. And that's all that gets done there. If you have that kind of room. I know some people have very small apartments or rooms or whatever, where they can't. And I understand that, but as much as possible, I really recommend doing that. And the other reason I recommend doing that is because coming from someone who has spent almost a decade working from home, if you're the type A kind of person, the real go-getter, it actually becomes very difficult to walk away from work when, if you don't have a set space in your home, in your living space, where that's where you do the work. So it's really helpful to have that set space where you can sit down at it and you're concentrated on work. And then when you walk away from it, you don't fucking touch it. And you don't, and that's it. You don't, you're not thinking about work. It's analogous to closing the door behind you, right? When you leave the office. That's the concept that you really want to go for. And we've talked about this over the past year. We've talked about this because, smartphones, and a lot of people are realizing this. Smartphones are basically like this mini office in your pocket following you everywhere you go. And you're kind of always working. And I don't think that's a good thing. What is it that Nietzsche said? Nietzsche said that if work takes more than 25% of the hours of the day, or something along those lines, then you're doing it wrong. Basically, that's basically what Nietzsche was saying, and I don't think he's wrong, about that. You're not really living if you're working that much, even if you love what you do. Now, granted, I have a lot of the stuff that entertains me. This is a good conversation to have. I did not plan on talking about this for 20 minutes, but I think that this is important, especially with what's going on in the world right now. And a lot of people are adjusting to how they are engaging their work life. So this is, this is valuable. A lot of my stuff, my little TV that's connected to my PlayStation 2 and that's connected to, to my GameCube and a bunch of my Blu-ray player and a bunch of other devices and everything. That's in my studio as well. But then, see, this is where I personally kind of run into a problem, and also why I like handheld devices and purpose-built devices. And I'll explain more. Part of the problem that I run into is that all of the things that I enjoy, or many of the things that I enjoy in life, are also tied in with what I do with Sovryn Tech, right? We talk about video games on here. We talk about movies and shows and whatever else and other forms of entertainment, even comic books and everything, which are also on computers. We talk about all that on this show. It's a part of it, and everything I do in life colors much of how I'm engaging the world, because they're products of the world at large, unless it's something I'm making myself. So that work-life balance, that's something I've been working on for a while. So I'm giving you tips from shall I say, to stick with the colloquialism of battle station, a battle-weary soul. Actually, I'm also a real battle-weary soul in the not so metaphorical, but regardless, as a battle-weary soul, I am giving you recommendations here. But that's something I love about the Nintendo Switch, or that I love about even my 3DS or whatever else, is that, or even, I have a separate, very small little laptop that's all it does is, it's built for using Tails for Tails OS. And that's my little Tails computer. Now it's very limited in what it can do, very limited in scope, partly because of Tails. Okay. And Tails, I don't call them limitations. I call them security implementations. But if you want to think of them as limitations, like you can't run fucking Photoshop on it. Okay, well, you can't. Among other things, and you try not to run it. You run as little JavaScript as possible, if any. And look at how the internet just broke. But having those separate devices that are purpose-built, that only do one thing and they just do that thing pretty well, is very handy and something that you can take away from the workspace, because that's a challenge that I run into, and I'm sure as fuck not going to have a television in every goddamn room. Not a chance. You need to have, in my opinion, it's a great idea to have rooms where there are A, as few electronics as possible, B, no goddamn screens. None, if you can help it. I know not everybody can help it, okay? And I empathize with you, and I've been there, and I know how that goes. But if you can help it, I like a sleeping space to have practically nothing in it, Actually, in fact, so, a lot of, longtime listeners know, and maybe even not so longtime listeners know, I'm very much into fitness. And the gyms, pretty much all of them, as far as I understand it. Maybe there's some boutique gyms that have stayed open, but I doubt it. Most of the gyms, if not all of the gyms in the United States, have closed. The big chains certainly have. And you're talking to a guy who's going 5 to 7 times, a week. That would go to the gym. And, Ellen and I would go on weekends and everything. And and for, we're talking 2-3 hours a shot. We'd spend a lot of time. And those being closed, that's a huge chunk, of our lives, kind of taken out. And so recently had to get a, bench for the house. It's a Gold's Gym XRS 20. That's what I ended up getting, and it's a very, very nice bench. Got a lot of nice options. You know, it has like a leg extension and leg curl extension to it. I mean, has some cool things to it. I already had, like a bunch of dumbbells and a bunch of plates and everything. I mean, that wasn't a problem, but, needed to kind of up the game at home for that. Now, I mean, one advantage when you're doing all this stuff, at home is that actually, I mean, speaking of like having rooms without screens, I hated going to Planet Fitness. I hated going to the gym, whatever gym, and there's just fucking screens everywhere, right? And they're playing the most banal goddamn music that you could ever possibly imagine. Maybe once or twice they'd play a good song, but I mean, it's very rare. I think maybe they played Motley Crue once, and I was like, holy shit, well, why are they playing Motley Crue? And of course, that's because they had a movie on Netflix, and fuck that cult. I mean, Netflix, not Motley Crue. And, but it's actually really nice, to not have all that distraction, and you can just concentrate on building the fucking muscle, and building up your body. And wonderful, wonderful. So, but that's the thing, is trying to have, and I know it can take a lot of space. It can take a lot of room, and not everybody's got it. But if you can, try to tailor these spaces to be purpose built. They do one thing only, and that way you can walk away from them. Not that I necessarily would want to walk away from the gym, but so that you can walk away from them, when you need to, and you can concentrate on other things, and other pursuits, other aspects of what you're doing. I mean, another great reason I love having an e-reader, I mean, unless you're into paper books, then that's great too. But, you have a dedicated device that's about reading. You go, you lay down, you turn on the candlelight if you want or whatever, and you lay down and you read. I mean, it's one of the most enjoyable things that I love, especially later at night, just laying down in bed with Ellen. She's got a book, I got a book, and, we're just there, candlelight and everything, and just reading some books. And then, of course, when we're done reading books, woo, sorry, things happen, but anyway, try, again, one of the keys to successfully working from home, if you find yourself in that scenario right now and you're not used to it, is to have dedicated spaces as much as possible for every task that you need to do. Anyway, let's get into, that was kind of part of the foreplay, but let's get into some of the subjects we really meant to talk about here. But got a little bit for the foreplay, but I mentioned the Sovryn Tech wish list. Okay. And actually that's an Amazon wish list. I know I don't like it either, but like they're kind of one of the few sites that has that option, and where there are things that, the show can certainly use. Again, that's wishlist.sovryntech.com. Now, like I said, don't go there today, because today, as I understand it, and why the fuck not? I know I have listeners who may not be into strikes and whatever else. And okay, if you're not, you're not. But I guess a lot of, so here's some perspective. Okay. So we talked about in recent episodes, because we've done a good trilogy or so on COVID-19, and how there's a term going around now called the Amazonification. Okay. The Amazonification of everything. And what that basically means is that, and I mean, there was even an article where I saw the headline where it said the most amazing thing to come out of COVID-19 is the fact that now Amazon is seen as a good company. Now, and that plays into, the Amazonification. Now, I have said for many, many, many years before any tech outlet, I know longtime listeners feel like this is a broken record, but I'm going to take credit where my opinion, pat myself on the back, it's fucking deserved. Long before any other tech podcast or tech news outlet was even bothering to talk about Amazon, I was saying, look, there's this thing. I coined the term the Amazon World Domination Tour. It basically means the same thing as Amazonification, but I came up with this years ago. It's a hashtag. It even took off a little bit. Basically saying, you don't understand, Amazon is eating everything. They are the tech giant. I mean, we could pretend that there's other tech giants, but really they are the one, and they don't really have any competition. Like, not even Google is competition for Amazon. Okay. In my opinion, you can argue that, well, argue it with me, that's fine. But I think, again, it's just showing more and more. I mean, Google certainly seemed to play nicely with the government. We talked about that recently, where they created a coronavirus website, and I guess they're helping out with getting testing and blah, 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 which I think I just heard recently, actually, that they're planning on human trials of the vaccine for September, the vaccine for COVID-19. But regardless, so while, I mean, Google might have been playing ball with that, I mean, the real winner out of this, or out of this whole situation, I mean, a lot of, online and a lot of like delivery services and so on, and yay, Domino's, Domino's Pizza. But while a lot of them are winning, I mean, Amazon is certainly winning as far as this goes. And I don't see any stories about Google Shopping or any shit like that. No, Amazon's the one that's really winning out of this. And because their business is ramping up, and not only their business, but also, so a lot of people don't know, and actually in the Telegram group, some great Sovryn Tech listeners were, amazing stuff gets shared in the Sovryn Tech Telegram group. There's a link in the show notes if you want to find it. All you got to do is click the link, and if you have Telegram installed, it'll hook you right up, take you right in. Okay. We'll talk about Telegram more in a second because Telegram 6.0 came out. But yeah, they were sharing varying things. And one of the amazing things was a Wikipedia article that laid out how many, and I don't even know if this is a complete list, but how many companies over the years that Amazon has acquired. And it's over 100. It's well over 100. And also ones that they have, like that they are stakeholders for is at least another 20. I'm sure those numbers are, I imagine there's more than that. Right. But those are the ones we do know of. One of the companies where they ended up were today, and this is getting recorded on Monday. This is Monday, March 30th. There is it's hashtag Instacart strike. Okay. So there's a company called Instacart, which is basically like DoorDash or whatever, or Grubhub, but it's for delivering, somebody goes shopping for you and they deliver you your groceries. Amazon, as I understand it, owns this, right? And so the workers for Instacart are going on strike saying they want better working conditions. The usual stuff strike's about, right? Better working conditions, better pay. Under, coronavirus, under what's happening with COVID-19. And basically this strike, they're asking people for at least today, Monday, and if you're just hearing of this, of course, I don't know how helpful it is, but at least for today, don't order things on Instacart and don't order things on Amazon. So, I appreciate that they're striking the root, right? Because this is what I fucking hate. You have so many people, even like your kind of more normal, like digital influencers or, YouTube quasi-famous people who will say, oh, fuck Facebook. I don't have a Facebook page, but they got an Instagram. It's like, wait, fuck Facebook, but you're using Instagram and you're using WhatsApp and you're okay. Whatever. Oh, you're talking to Messenger. Oh, right. All right. It's ridiculous. So I at least appreciate that they're saying, that they're like, well, okay, if you're not going to buy an Instacart, also please don't buy on Amazon. I guess also this would mean, you'd have to pay attention to how many properties Amazon even has, which that's a minor pain in the ass, right? I guess you're not going to go to Whole Foods either. But regardless of that, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? If we want to use those kinds of rules, anything that fucks with Amazon, I say great. And there's some projections that really, like, if people for a day, I don't know how many people, but if people for a day did not order, off of Amazon, that I guess it would hit them pretty hard. And these are funny numbers, right? Because for one, Amazon is it's a very global thing. But, actually, Ellen and I were going for a walk over the weekend, and I was reminded of this because, the gas prices have dropped like yesterday's newspaper. They under $2 gas. I was living in Florida the last time I saw that. That was at least 15 years ago since I've seen under $2 gas. And here I am in New Hampshire, and it's that way. It's remarkable. And I get some of the intricacies of why that's happening, even beyond COVID-19. There's a little bit of a dick measuring, frankly, going on between Russia and some Saudis. But anyway, I remember when gas, it was 07, 08, somewhere around there, maybe 09, when gas was going above $4 a gallon in a lot of parts of the United States. And I remember then that there were activists or economists or whatever, not necessarily libertarian types either, who were coming out and saying that even if just like a certain amount of towns, I forget what the exact numbers were, and I was going to look this up. I haven't gotten the chance, so I mean, just take it for what you will here. That if just for like a couple days they didn't buy gas, just some towns, that it would basically send the entire oil market crashing. Because the amount of speculation and like the really tight numbers that the oil industry runs off of would be totally fucked if just the right amount of people, basically stopped buying, stopped purchasing gas and so on. I don't necessarily know how true that is, and feel free to either message me in the Telegram group or email me bbs@sovereigntech.com if that's all bullshit. But I've heard these sorts of things before, varying, and how true they'd end up being when they actually happen, who knows, if they actually happened. But I mean, I always appreciate these kinds of, conscientious consumer bits of activism, regardless of necessarily what's behind them. I tease this on a recent Q&A. And if you want to hear the Q&As, of course, go to zomia1.com. You can sign up there just on the right-hand side. Actually, if you look at any of the episodes, it'll tell you that our premium content that's behind a paywall, you can there's like a little link under it that says join premium, and you can click that, and you can, as little as $2 a month, and away you go. But I was talking about this on a Q&A. It's amazing to see in the news, and even when you're just walking around town, it's amazing to see just how many, there are, and not all of them are as sexy to where they warrant that the Washington Post, which I guess you better not read that either if you're on an Amazon strike, or go to the website. But it might not be sexy enough to get published in the Washington Post, but there are so many companies, even ones that were already designed to work from home. It's not that they didn't necessarily have agility, but there are so many companies, even companies with, 10, 13 person teams, or even companies that have 1,300 employees, have gone out of business. They've just flat out gone out of business. Okay. Now, that didn't really require, any political action, because they went out before even the state of emergency was declared. They went out before, governors were, ordering shelter in place. They went out before, before there was anything official. All it took was people to be concerned about, potentially contracting a virus or whatever. That's all it took. No political action required. There was no business that came in, or concept. It wasn't like, and this is no offense to Bitcoin, because it's just one of the few exciting things left in the world. It didn't take an invention like Bitcoin. It didn't take anything like that. All it took is, at the very least, perception, if not reality, of, the present situation with COVID-19. And whole swaths, things have crashed. Now, on one level, you can say this is in an abstraction, that this is voting with your dollar, right? We can say that, and that's not untrue, but it's kind of the point. Like, all it takes is don't buy into it. You can shut this whole fucking thing down if you just stop buying, whatever the fuck it is that they're selling. It didn't require, I mean, again, no political action. You didn't have to run for office. You didn't have to do any other horseshit. You could shut down whole swaths of the economy and, frankly, the government by just not complying. COVID-19 has amazingly brought it has proven. I mean, now there's a lot of, okay, yes, businesses have to be shut down for such and so long. I mean, now there's a lot of regulation and everything around it. But even before any of that went into place, straight up non-compliance shut down entire swaths of civilization. It's funny because, I hear from, I know I have a lot of listeners that come from a lot of different ideological persuasions. Some like to even think they come from the persuasion of non-ideology, which, hey, go for it, baby, whatever. Okay. We talk, and yet they come from all these different ideas. Oh, we need to, I've got everybody from start a disruptive business to run for office to seize the means of production. I've got all types that listen to me. Well, I think we have seen that non-compliance straight up, okay, actually works. Because I think a lot of people have debated, okay, well, but does starting, a gray business, like a gray or an agorist business, and a real agorism, you know what I mean by that, or running for office and all this stuff. I think all of that to prove somehow that has wide ranging effects. A lot of that has yet to really be proven. Okay. I mean, Bitcoin is certainly, showing its stuff, but largely outside of that, perhaps, I don't think you see a whole lot of cases where there is massive disruption as to where we are seeing, again, based upon reality or perception, we are seeing where non-compliance and people might not even perceive it that they're engaging in non-compliance, but at the abstract level, that's exactly what it is. That it absolutely works. It will shut shit down so fast. You will have signs on doors. You will hell. And you got to be careful with some of this, because I do think some of the reactions, some of the business matters that have come out of, that have come out of everything with COVID-19. Some of this are, like I said, or like I've been saying past few episodes, there are multiple forces taking advantage of this situation. For example, there's a story, there's 300, GameStop got such a black eye for this because they considered themselves an essential business. And so they stayed open, and everybody online anyway. And again, the online world isn't exactly the real world. That doesn't go both ways, but regardless, online people were just skewering the company. What the fuck are you doing? And now GameStop has finally decided to shutter, temporarily, a lot of their doors, but then at least 300 of their retail stores in the United States have been shut down, and they're shut down for good. Like, it's over. Now, in the case of GameStop, I think that this is something that's just a long time coming. And basically this gave GameStop an excuse that not to explain it to consumers or customers, but to explain it to their investors. Okay. When GameStop, I talked about this a while back, and not that this would have helped them through what's happening with COVID-19, but years ago when GameStop bought ThinkGeek, we actually talked about it on Sovryn Tech. And I thought that I gave them a plan of action. And I used to be, well, anyway, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. But I used to be to use a term, I used to be a platinum customer, okay, with GameStop. I could tell you stories, and I've told some of those stories on Sovryn Tech over the years, but midnight launches and all this other shit. Anyway, I was fairly well known, but, I said on the show, okay, you bought ThinkGeek. Here's your opportunity. You need to pivot, because digital game stores, not just Steam, but this is going to become a thing for every console going forward, right? Because we also, many an attentive gamer saw this coming, not just cloud gaming, but like gaming where you're going to be, because of the size of the games, you're not going to buy 100 gig or you're not going to buy 100 gig Blu-ray disc, for every game that you get or whatever. And Xbox would never touch it anyway. So, or Microsoft would never touch that. But regardless, okay, it was becoming a thing. It was basically inevitable. And, I've brought this up on episodes of Gaming Grid in the past where there's a niche market for making physical copies of games, but I saw the writing on the wall almost 10 years ago, almost a decade ago. And that's when I finally caved on not owning physical. I mean, I'll buy physical, if it's like Sigil, I bought physical because that you're basically getting the final version of the game when you buy it. So that's fine. And it all comes on its own thing. It's something that you actually download off the disc. So 10 years ago, when Duke Nukem Forever came out, of course, I'm a huge fan of Duke Nukem. And I've told this story about I was there for the midnight launch. I bought the big special edition box set and everything. I still have it, actually. It comes with a little statue of Duke in there. It's fucking awesome. A little comic book and all this. I go to put the disc because, I bought the PC version, and I go to put the disc in my, nice gaming laptop at the time and everything. And this is when laptops still had disk drives and CD drives, I should say, optical drives. I go to put that in, and it instantly says, okay, please install Steam, because I didn't have Steam at the time because I was still a guy that was into hard copy. Please install Steam and then put your code into Steam. And it pissed me the fuck off because, it was like an 8 gig game at the time, and it had to download all of that. At the time I didn't have blazing internet, and it had to download the whole fucking game. And so I couldn't play it until the next day because it was downloading it overnight. I had the fucking physical copy of the game. I bought the physical copy of the game, and it still wanted to download it from Steam. And then, you have the whole thing. So there's that. So that was basically forcing me to say, okay, I'm not buying physical anymore if I can help it. Now, I mean, when at the time, the Nintendo DS, not 3DS, but Nintendo DS was still a thing. That was one where, other than the DSi, when you bought the game was done. That's how I think games should be made, but whatever. I know we live in a world where patches are a thing. Okay. So anyway, by and large, that's where I finally gave up. It's all right, if they're just going to force me to download it off of some platform, well then fuck it. I mean, GOG tries to stop that, but even GOG, right, where you have, you can take copies of the games, and for most of their games, there isn't DRM. Most, not all anymore, unfortunately, but they still do updates. And so buying a physical copy of the game does jack shit for you, right? Even say I mentioned earlier, the Nintendo Switch. I love the Switch. It's so funny that, I go to Nintendo news sites and everything, and everybody's like, well, I'll wait till it comes out physical. What? Why? They're not going to give you the latest fucking version. I mean, sometimes they give you the latest version of the game, but then there might be a version 1.12 after 1.11 that's on your cartridge, and it's still got to download that from the internet. And sometimes it's whole expansion packs, whole new mission packs and everything that end up, coming on those expansions or in that new version. So what the fuck's the point to owning the physical copy? I mean, I know there's a couple arguments to it, but ultimately you still got to download shit from online, and so I'm saying all this to illustrate why GameStop is meaningless. Okay. Because even if you're into physical copies, you still got to download the updates, and so there's no point to it. And eventually people are going to wisen up to that, or I don't know. I guess they like making their shelves look pretty, and I'm fully supportive of that. That's fine if that's what you're into, but you can't be a multi-thousands of stores retail company and live off of the few people that want to have, fancy shelving. And I'm so supportive of that, supportive of fancy shelving. Please don't confuse me. I love the big boxes. I love the boxes. I get it. I don't have any, or I don't have many, but I understand. Okay. I'm not insulting that. I'm just saying they can't make a business off of you. Now you can make a niche business off of those kinds of people, right? And that's what limited run games and some other ones do. And great. I think that's fine. It's like the vinyl industry, right? Or the audio cassette industry. People who are buying music on tape again or on record. Great. Okay. But we can't make entire store chains out of you. out of those niche clientele, out of those niche customer bases. It's just not going to happen. And GameStop has had to have known this for a long time. Now, what I was saying was I gave them a plan of action. I said, here's what you do. You own ThinkGeek now. Turn your GameStops into like these nerdy fucking hangouts. Turn them into Starbucks is kind of already for nerds in a way. And I say nerds with absolute respect. I am the king of the nerds. Really? I'm not kidding. But make it like a super fucking nerdy hangout. Now that you have ThinkGeek, like you've got all these licenses with all these other companies where you don't have to just deal in video games. And man, you could have some pretty awesome places and turn them into community spaces. I mean, that's basically what Apple is trying or was trying to do with their stores, is turn them into massive, like it's like going to Apple Land, like Disneyland, but the Apple version of it. GameStop could have done that. If they pivoted a bit, they could have survived. But instead, they just kept doing more or less business as usual, and that's bullshit. They wouldn't even necessarily get into selling classic games, which there are some boutique game stores that's what they concentrate on, is like retro stuff, which that's great. Of course, that can only last so long, especially as console generations go more and more online. Okay, so all of this is to say that while I think that this act of non-compliance that has come out of COVID-19 has forced GameStop's hand, at the same time, GameStop has been looking for an excuse to shut down a bunch of stores and fire an ass ton of people. Okay, like I think that's just a fact. Bottom line, non-compliance works economically, politically, across the board. And I've waved that flag, for lack of a better phrase, of engaging in non-compliance. If you want to do real activism, that's how you do it. Okay. And that takes a lot of different shapes. Now, I mean, admittedly, this is affecting Amazon's business model too. And whether or not, and do I think that, well, there's the perception that it's affecting their model, because I also think that Amazon is, frankly, I think trying to save a lot of money on shipping, because try getting 2-day shipping today. Yeah, right. There's stuff where I've seen, to go to order, and regardless of the fact that Amazon claims that they are concentrating on, essentials that to sell to people. Okay. They're concentrating on those more instead of like the non-essentials, but they are putting in massive lead times into when your item could potentially arrive. I mean, something that you order on March 26th could have a lead time of like May 4th. Seriously. I mean, personally, I think that's Amazon taking advantage of the situation. And I mean, they've got great CRM and stocking software that basically, I mean, and half that's run by robots anyway, literally. But talk about acquisitions that they made years ago. That's when I talked about, years ago, because I was eyeing that when it happened in the early aughts. But anyway, they know, how they can most cost effectively ship certain things, from varying warehouses, and how that can work out. Okay. Now, I mean, they are, and they're making it clear that it's allowing for delays, right? Like, so when you order something today and it says when you go to order it, guaranteed to arrive by May 4th, there's a good chance you'll get it this week. Right. But either way, I'm pretty sure Amazon's saving a lot of money right now on not having to live up to that 2-day shipping, or even the expectation of, like, what was it? Amazon Now? Was that what it, Amazon and Google use a lot of the same terms for different things. I think it was Amazon Now, where they'd have it to you in like 30 minutes or less, or like an hour or less, something like that. Like it'd be same day shipping or same day delivery, and obviously that was mainly in cities, but that's what they'd have. I mean, like that's that's got to have gone the way of the dodo now. Maybe it's still happening in certain areas, but I mean, that's what they had gotten to. But also understand, I mean, while Amazon was offering those services to make you an Amazon customer and hopefully a Prime member, number one, okay? So, you can pay the Amazon tax. Now they don't really need that because this scenario has basically made delivery services for a lot of people. It's made them seemingly, keyword, essential. So I think Amazon's fine with not having to do same day delivery, next day delivery, which was becoming more common in areas where Amazon's own delivery service outside of UPS and USPS, and 2-day delivery, those not being a part of the program anymore. Oh, they are saving so much money with that. I mean, frankly, they've got to be loving that. Again, as we've been saying since this whole thing, came on everybody's radar, multiple forces are taking advantage of the situation. I don't know how that's a controversial statement. I've gotten some emails from people that are like, disagreeing with me on that. I think it's inarguable. Like I'll tell you, if I was not a nice guy, and I'm constantly told I'm not, but if I was not a nice guy, I would, let's say I owned a restaurant chain, I was like a franchisee that owned a restaurant chain in a city or something, or even in more at a state level, or statewide, I should say, not at the state level, but, statewide, I would totally be lobbying the governor's office. Oh, we got to shut down restaurants, blah, 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 because I'd want to kill off all the mom and pop restaurants that, maybe couldn't survive. As to where, as a franchisee who owns a chain of restaurants, I can, obviously I have more money, shall I say, to play with. Okay. Because I, am part of a larger chain. In fact, maybe I even have them in multiple states, and I can keep some stores running that can, keep profits flowing in another state that I can in one, or something along those lines. Bottom line being is that, I have a lot more options when I'm somebody who owns a much larger, where I have multiple stores and blah, 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 as to where, the little restaurant down the street that might have, I don't know, awesome chicken wings or something, that everybody still seems to go to, they could get shut down. As to where, if I'm a larger larger corporate entity of some kind, I might be able to ride out this storm of shutdowns, and I would be fucking lobbying like there's no tomorrow. I mean, it's very similar to the example I give many times on the show, where in the 80s, when there was the whole lead paint scare, which is very real, I mean, I'm not going to argue against what lead paint does to a child's mind or to any mind. I mean, I think the research has been well done on that, but absolutely, Kenner, Hasbro, go down the list of major toy companies. They were lobbying for the government to create regulation against lead paint. Why? Because they had the money, being much larger corporations, much larger businesses. They had the money to convert all of their operations to non-lead based paint. The little mom and pop toy companies that were actually doing pretty good business, even at the time, they couldn't convert, but it was law. They had to get the new machinery or shut down. And what did most of them do? They shut down. I mean, it's just a way to take out your competition. That's what I'm saying. I mean, there are so many different angles to this. It doesn't have to have anything to do with New World Order or invented stuff or, some morons like HIV deniers or whatever. I mean, that's just stupidity. I mean, all this kinds of made us, it doesn't have to do any of that. There are still, regardless of anything, there are absolutely, provably multiple forces taking advantage of the situation. Like, say, even GameStop's taking advantage of this. Amazon's taking advantage of this for reasons that, depending upon definition of maliciousness, I mean, they could be malicious or they could just be, cleaning up the books, whatever. So anyway, it's funny. I said that I didn't want to talk about COVID-19 anymore on the show. And yet here I am. I'm basically doing an entire episode on it again. My apologies. I assure you, we will do our level best to get past this. So anyway, bottom line, if you want to take the day off or however long from buying on Amazon, If you can really pull it off, don't do it ever again. Again, it's tough, right? Because they own so many companies. I mean, the one I've always brought up that makes it very hard is, well, book sales, both ebook, regular books even, because some of those only come through, I mean, Kindle, what was it, CreateSpace or whatever that they bought out? They bought out the company that made it easy for one of the companies, because there's a few of them, but one of the companies that makes it easy for you to come out with print books. They just bought the company. They just acquired the company. They acquired Audible right now. And I bring this up a lot. I mean, it's tough for me because I've had an Audible account before Amazon owned it, and I have hundreds of books in Audible, and anyway, this gets into tough scenarios, right? Because what do you just let all of that go? Well, what you can really do is just strip all the DRM, and then I guess you could let it go. But there's still so many more books that only come out on Audible. I mean, it becomes a real challenge. But anyway, if you want to engage in some non-compliance and, I don't know, join the strikers and not buying on Amazon, hey, rock and roll, good for you. Anyway, I want to wrap up with a couple other things that have come out, give you some useful stuff to walk away from this episode. There's stories I'm not going to be able to get into this episode because we ended up, this happens. We end up calling, of all coincidences, we end up calling an audible. And I end up talking about a whole other thing. But we'll get into it in the next episode, certainly, which will be coming out in short order. But anyway, before I get into the last couple bits here, got to tell you about Sovryn Tech sponsor that, great place. Actually, if you have an idea for non-compliance, I'll tell you a place that you can get it out there and perhaps get it out to a whole ton of people. We are talking about, you could reach out to Sovryn Tech sponsor, Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live is the number 26 talk show in the United States. You're going to get out to a big audience out there. And it's also the only libertarian radio show on the national airwaves. You've got to check it out. freetalklive.com, runs 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night. COVID-19 ain't stopping that action, baby. And just a tremendous show. It's an open phones call-in show. So you can call in, talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about. And there's so much to listen to because they have been going on for well over a decade. You've got a lot to join in on. In fact, go back in some of those archives for a couple of years, you're going to hear the man of tomorrow because I had my tenure on there, and it was an honor for me to I even first chaired a few times, which means that I was basically the main host running the boards, the whole thing. And I certainly learned a lot being on Free Talk Live and had a great time getting to interact with people. Something that I really got to work on for Sovryn Tech to do more. Had it for a little while. We got to bring that back. So anyway, freetalklive.com, please frequent them, listen to them. You can even tell them that you heard about it from the man of tomorrow, from the Golden Stallion. They're going to know exactly who you're talking about because they are fans of the show as well. So anyway, freetalklive.com, and I thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Now, all of that said, let's get into what little bits I had for the foreplay. Originally, I still had 3 other stories for the foreplay. And then all this shit happens. So we talked, I don't know if I brought this up in episode, I don't remember if I brought it up in episode 367. I know we brought this up recently. I don't know if I brought up the resolution to the matter. But Chrome OS had basically stopped development. Now, that's a scary proposition for a lot of people. It's like, wait a minute, are we not going to get security updates? What the fuck happened here? Yeah, because of the 0-day drops, you're kind of screwed. Well, just in the past few days, the Chrome OS team came out and said, oh no, we're back in business. We're developing Chrome OS more. And, we're on our merry way. We are still skipping version 82, which is what we had mentioned before. And they are going right to version 83. And that will be coming out. The regular release schedule is going to continue. So that picked right back up. Not a whole lot to talk about there. Why they even bothered stopping. I'm kind of baffled. You know what? So I posited a theory that it had to do with versioning numbers, and they just didn't want, it was so tight compared to their schedule. They didn't want to putz around with it a bit. I wonder if it's quite simply because we know that the coronavirus website, as simple as that looks, which is why I think there's got to be a whole lot more coming for that, took something like 1,700 Google workers, or Googlers as they're called, Google workers to develop. I wonder if a lot of that was the Chrome OS team, because it has that feel, right, of the kind of the Chrome UI design language, right? It's Google's overall, but that all kind of bleeds into Chrome and Chrome OS. But yeah, so maybe they're done with the website and they moved on. Now they're back to work working on Chrome OS. Okay. So anyway, that might be what's happening there. More interesting, I think, are the other two releases that happened just over the past couple of days. And that one is Telegram, and Telegram. Now this is it. So version 6.0 came out, which I mentioned earlier. The main updates here with this, and I hope this is a sign of its growth in use. In fact, I got another sign of that I'm going to mention in a minute, but they have added in the ability to create chat folders. Basically, you can create folders on kind of the sidebar, depending on how you're looking at it. If you're looking at the desktop or if you're looking at it in the app, you have you can create folders where you can put the varying chats that you have, like if you have work-related chats, or if you have a lot of personal chats, or hell, I don't know, maybe you have sexy chats, whatever you got. You can put them all together like into one folder and then put the others in another folder and so on. I mean, I think it's pretty slick. And I just scroll through my Telegram contacts, and messages. And as soon as they said, yeah, we created folders for this, I was like, wow, that's brilliant. In fact, I don't know of any other messaging app that's done that. Maybe WhatsApp already did it, and I don't know because fuck Facebook, but I don't know that Messenger ever bothered to do that. I think it's a pretty brilliant thing to come up with because I have so many contacts in Telegram. This is instantly a handy thing, in my opinion, that I can just like kind of organize everything by folders. I love it. I mean, I had already started like organizing conversations by groups, which was really handy, that you could create a group where you could share, whatever you might need to share. And that way it doesn't interfere with primary communications. Not that it'd be much in the way of interference, or not a unwelcome interference anyway. But anyway, now there's chat folders. They also, if you have a channel or group that happens to have, I think it works for groups as well, that happens to have more than 1,000 subscribers, you can get stats for that. And they do look like, I saw an example of what that looks like. They look fairly anonymous. Because I mean, that would, if you have these kinds of stats, wait, does Telegram collect all those stats? That's scary, right? I mean, that would kind of defeat the purpose of Telegram being a very private platform. I know there's other concerns around Telegram's privacy, right? That has to do with their encryption, among other things. I'm already well fucking aware of those, and we've talked about them many times over the years. But again, I think these are both very welcome additions. Also, and this is something that I like too, that came in version 6.0, is you have the ability to archive messages now. Now, actually, Signal has had this for a little while, but you can just archive messages if you don't want a certain, I mean, I have some chats where I haven't continued the chat in 6 years, maybe even longer. So this is a very handy feature to have where you can make those chats disappear, but you can still keep them in your history. And that's really Telegram's. I mean, in fact, we talked about this because Pavel Durov did like a whole write-up about that, who was the owner of Telegram, did a whole write-up about this, where, he said, he's like, look, he says, you're never going to get mass adoption of a platform or of a messaging platform that doesn't keep your history over multiple devices easily enough, and this is true. I mean, Signal on Android, and as far as I know, it's only on Android. iOS can't do this. You can make backups, but those backups will only work. Admittedly, they're a little bit of a pain in the ass, a little bit, but they only work on the phone itself. If you get a new computer and you sync with Signal Desktop, you don't get that whole history. Now, I kind of disagree with Pavel Durov, but there are ways that I think things should work. And then there's ways that actually do work or that how people want the commoners, if I'm going to use that term, want things to work, right? And I get it that Pavel Durov's right. The everyday person is going to want a messaging platform that does give them their chat history across devices. And even, that isn't a pain in the ass to to have to back up and restore and blah, blah, blah. He's not wrong about that. I'm not saying that that's how things should be. In fact, I think they shouldn't, but I do understand for the populace that that's how they are. Anyway, having the archive function, that's pretty nice too. I mean, they made some other like little fun stuff, where like, new animated emojis and stickers, and I don't care about any of that crap. And even the Signal updates lately have been all about that too. And it's a little fucking annoying, but whatever. Telegram 6.0 is out there. I think that, again, the fact that it just gets constantly developed and even now is getting features that I think are unique, kind of brilliant additions and ahead of the curve of other messaging platforms. I mean, I'm on board with it because even if Telegram doesn't do some things right, the overall ethos of Telegram as a platform is the right one, in my opinion. And getting people into that mode of thinking that, no, I want my stuff encrypted, and as they learn more about Telegram, they kind of, it's very much a gateway. If I'm going to use a term, it's very much a gateway drug into the crypto mindset. Okay. And I don't mean cryptocurrency necessarily either. I mean crypto in general. And I think that that's only a good thing. And I'm all right with that. That's been one of my arguments for Telegram for many years now. So in fact, I was surprised now because I did the episode for COVID-19. It was Have a Corona. That was all about with my technical expertise and whatever else, what do I recommend you do to prepare in these situations? What should you use in the scenario that we live in right now with COVID-19 and everything, or in the situation we live in right now? And one of my recommendations was using Telegram. Partly that was because you could, Telegram actually has some great local features, like find people locally and whatever. I mean, like really great stuff that you have to turn on, but it's there for you to use. But I was surprised. There was a podcast I was listening to that I appreciate. It's called, I appreciate overall. I've had some criticisms of them in the past, but Mind Pump is the name of it. It's a fitness podcast. And I know I have other listeners who listen to it as well. They kind of got me interested in it. I always love learning about new great podcasts. There aren't many other great podcasts out there, but anyway, I do appreciate Mind Pump overall. And on there, they were talking about varying apps that you could use to get used to, like, working from home and whatever. And they recommended Telegram. Now, I don't know if any of my listeners had anything to do with that, or they were just on the cusp already, which if they were, great. But I was really, really pleased to hear that because it's not really a tech show at all. Sometimes they talk about varying subjects that are kind of interesting. I like listening to Mind Pump. It's one of the few that I listen where I am getting information that I want, but it's also enjoyable because like the guys on there will kind of talk about pop culture that I just don't understand, like that I wouldn't encounter any other way. So I sort of get to hear from like normies. I'm not saying they're normies. I'm just saying I think they know they're kind of talking to a lot of normies, not all, but some. And anyway, it's an interesting view in the world that I wouldn't get anywhere else. So I enjoy that because, I mean, I can only handle the normal world, the world of the normies. I can only handle that in small doses, I had this in for the foreplay, and I'm going to save it for another episode because like some of the hashtags that I see taking over or the subjects that are trending on Twitter, I'm just completely fucking lost. Like I saw one, it was hashtag iTunes over party or iTunes is over party, basically saying cancel iTunes, I guess. I don't know. Hey, I've been saying cancel iTunes since version 10. I said that years, and I used to love iTunes, right? And it had something to do with a band called 5 Seconds of Summer or something. And I'm just looking at this and I go, holy fuck, like humanity is doomed, when I just looked up this subject. And I mean, I thought it was like, oh, finally people have got it. Like, yeah, okay, we're not going to deal with iTunes anymore. We're not going to deal with all this crap. And we're going to keep, maybe they're into like, I don't know, at the very least running Plex or some kind of local serving of their music or whatever. No. What the hell was I thinking that people would come up with something intelligent? Anyway, so like I say, I can only handle like the normal world and I need to come up with a better term for that. I can only handle it in small doses, and Mind Pump is where I get those small doses. But I sort of use that as a little bit of a weather belt or weather gauge of, how are things that I'm interested in, perhaps, maybe seeping into more normal, the normal world, right? Normal civilization or whatever. And to hear Telegram talked about on there as one of the other app, I think was called House Party or something. I have no interest in that just by the name. But to hear Telegram getting recommended as one of the 2 apps of ways to communicate with people, they didn't say Skype, they didn't say WhatsApp, they didn't say iMessage, they didn't say any of that. They said Telegram. I thought that was fantastic. I was like, oh, fucking win right there, baby. And again, I know I have listeners of Sovryn Tech who listen to Mind Pump. If you had anything to do with that, you can let me know. I'd be intrigued to know. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I'd be intrigued to know. I'm thankful that Mind Pump brought it up, and because I hope more people start using the platform. I mean, if they want to use Signal too, dynamite, go that far. But at least getting on Telegram, great. So, and now that there's Telegram 6.0, I mean, it's an area where I think Telegram is going to continue to win because most apps, like, you got to understand, even just a few years ago, okay, and we're talking like pre-Jelly Bean days for Android, getting an app update was fucking exciting, right? Because it wasn't security updates most of the time. I mean, those were baked in too, but that wasn't, I mean, now when you get updates, like, they don't even bother to tell you the changelog because it's bug fixes and security updates, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But back then, an app update could add in like a whole new feature set. And then suddenly the app looked totally new and, all this wild shit was happening. And it was like, you were just so excited at any point of the day to, go to, at the time, was it called, whatever it used to be before it was the Play Store, the Google App Store or whatever they called it back then. You'd go there all the time hoping for an update because holy shit, what is this app going to do now? I mean, it was so fucking exciting. And apps and all of that has really tapered off and leveled off. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but that excitement is gone. But I got to tell you, every time Telegram, or most of the times the Telegram comes out with an update, like, there's major features that they add in, and it's always really exciting to get those updates. And I got to give them credit for that. Telegram, I got to give them credit for that. And so I think that that's exciting. And I think it's one of the recipes that's really going to get them to win people over, is that there's this excitement of, wow, look at all these new features in here. And some of the stuff's big, even if there are things I don't 100% agree with, like Telegram Passport, or some other things. I mean, anyway, good on them. Boy, there was actually some news about the Gram recently. I'm going to save that for a future episode, which is Telegram's cryptocurrency, or whatever they want to call it. We'll get into that another time. The other thing I want to leave you with, which is really, really exciting and might be a good thing to do with one of your Chromebooks, even though we recently talked about how on a Chromebook you can install the Tor browser full version, which is pretty cool. But Tails version 4.5, the developers released a release candidate for version 4.5. Now, it's release candidate. It's not the final version. Okay. It's not the stable, but release candidate 4.5 can boot up Tails with secure boot still turned on. This is a huge win for Tails. And I talked about it when they announced that they were working on it a few weeks ago. But now we've got the release candidate. I tried it out. It worked on 2 machines that I tested on, and I was so fucking excited for that. Because, again, that can allow it to boot up on Chromebooks. It creates, there's a little more work involved, but it just opens up a lot of different devices that Tails can work on now. And that's really exciting. Of course, Tails is it's basically the operating system based around Tor. The Amnesic Incognito Live System. That's what Tails stands for. It's an acronym. This is like one of the tools that I think activists should really get used to, and people who just want their privacy, which you're basically an activist at that point in this day and age. This is one of the primary tools you should have at your disposal, right? It's an operating system on a flash drive that you have with you at all times, should be sitting on the same keychain. as your YubiKey, right? That's how it works for me, and always ready. And yeah, I love that this can work on so many more devices now. That's such a win. And to keep Secure Boot on also, I mean, that helps out with security issues as well. So this is a win overall. Very excited about this. When the final version of 4.5 comes out, of course, I will announce it. I also regularly share updates from the Tails development team on my Twitter at Sovryn Tech, which you can follow that there. I still tweet, now and again, but mainly I stick around within Telegram itself. I mean, Telegram has really, just in the past few months, even though I've been using it for years, just in the past few months has really become almost my internet. Like that's my gateway to communicating with others. I mean, I do other things too, obviously, but that's a biggie now. And certainly, like, I mean, I'll never leave Twitter completely, just on a business standpoint, but yeah, a lot of my conversation and everything has just morphed over there. I mean, especially since there's again, join the group and find out. There's such brilliant shit being discussed. I mean, listeners helping each other out in such incredible ways that I could have never imagined. People being there for each other and sharing things. It's such a beautiful thing. Again, link is in the show notes for that. So anyway, I think we're going to wrap up this episode of Sovryn Tech, and we will save the stories that I had. And we got some fun ones. Going to save that for episode 369. And then, like I said at the top, 370 might be some surprises. So I spoil it now. Anyway, that's it for this week's Sovryn Tech. Of course, go to zomia1.com or sovryn-tech.com and get your hookup there with all the content. And I will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.